adventurers, and welcome to the Micflayers podcast, coming to you today from an ancient pyramid deep beneath the frozen wastes of Alaska, where we've just discovered a fascinating room full of eggs. My name is Martin O'Dwyer, and with me today is your host, Conor O'Brien. How are we doing today, Conor?
As soon as you were like below the frozen ice, I'm like, I know that movie. Yes.
Yes.
That movie. Okay, those movies get a lot of shit because they're not like great, but I love the lore of the predators like hunting humans as like practice, and then the aliens are the ultimate like killing machines.
They're the ultimate
if they
prey.
can, yeah, so if they can kill the ultimate killing machine, then they are the ultimate killing machine. I love that whole setup and the way that like why do cultures in Africa and in like Central America and stuff both make pyramids? Oh, because these aliens taught them to. It's a really cool idea. I'm good, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, folks, if you can't guess, today we're going to talk about using sci-fi in D&D, which is very exciting. I'm really, really looking forward to it. But yes, Alien vs Predator was the film I was referencing there.
Yes, the classic Alien vs Predator.
Which I think my Predator watching literally went like Predator, Predator 2, Alien vs Predator, in like when I was a kid. I distinctly remember my dad taking me and my cousin to the cinema to see Alien vs Predator, and I got like super freaked out by it. Now that I think of it, it was a trailer for that terrible, terrible video game adaptation movie House of the Dead. But I think I was like 8 or 9 when I went to see Alien vs Predator, and I just got super freaked out by the trailer because there's like this dark shot where like a zombie comes up to someone's face and it cuts to black and you just hear like the sound of someone being like bitten and all like the flesh ripping, and that just freaked me out as an 8-year-old really badly. I had to actually leave the cinema and like get some air and come back. But the film as an 8-year-old was sick because when you're 8 you know nothing about good story structure.
Hold up.
Okay.
I recognize no one from this movie. I just looked up the cast here because I don't remember this movie at all.
It's a terrible movie. I think it's Uwe Boll directed it, and he is a notoriously terrible director.
It has a 3% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah,
single digit.
That sounds about right.
God.
Like, it's based off. Do you remember, like, Joe, when you were a kid, and this is going to be a very Irish reference, but you know when you were a kid and you went to like Hinch or something into like the arcade or the amusements and there'd always be like a zombie shooting game where you were in an old house surrounded by a swamp and you would just kind of go up the floors and zombies would pop up like Time Crisis and you'd have the light guns and you'd shoot them.
Yeah.
That's House of the Dead.
And they made a movie off that.
They did. That was around the time of like the first Resident Evil movie, which is actually one of the best terrible video game movies. Around the time of that, and around the time they did like, I think it was like around the time of that, and the House of the Dead, and they did like, it was like that early 2000s, like 2000 to 2005, 6 period, where like they were just doing really terrible video game movie adaptations, and then continued to do so for the next 16 years.
Yeah, I also there was also there was one person I recognized in the cast, and it's Erica Durant, who is Lois Lane in Smallville, and she's the only actress I recognize in the entire cast.
Man, I always feel so sorry for Smallville once I heard about like the like stuff that the studio was like, you cannot do this, you can't do this and this, like you can't put him in the suit, he can't fly, like all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, oh wow, that show is like shockingly decent considering the limitations that were placed upon it.
Oh, I didn't realize that they had such a. So what was it DC specifically? Was like, we don't want you doing a Superman show, so you can do like a Clark Kent show if you'd like. Kind of thing.
I'm honestly not 100%. I just know it was like part of the rule, like a condition of making the show. He can't fly. He can't ever wear the suit. That's why if you like the last episode of Smallville, is like him in the lift and he pulls the shirt open and you see the blue underneath. And then then it cuts to him outside and it's someone like, but it's like someone looking up at him, like flying.
I think it's actually Erica Durant as Lois Lane is watching him fly away.
It is. Yeah. She's actually a really good actress, but she's like the film, but like the show doesn't look at him. It swings around to look at her looking up at him, and I think maybe the last shot of the show it swings back around and you don't even see him. You see his outline behind like the sun or something.
I was gonna say, do you see like a shadow and a kind of cape kind of billowing in the shadow? Yeah.
You never actually see Tom Welling flying in the suit, and it's such a heartbreaker. But yes, today we're going to talk about sci-fi in D&D. And also, fun fact, Conor, the name for the predator species is the Yatuja.
That's right. I'm not super well versed on. I've seen the Predator movies and most of them anyway. I'm not super well versed on
Ooh.
them.
You could
Um,
play a really dope like Thriking. I want to say like what would be like the most techy. Yeah, you could play like a Thriking gunslinger, and
or do like a what you call it? Oh, the Artificer Artillerist maybe.
yeah, I
And
just
you could pretend like one of your arcane cannon is like a shoulder mount instead of in your hand.
yeah I know I just picked fighter because like the predators are so like combat orientated and hunting
Yeah,
orientated, and
yeah.
there isn't really a range or subclass that's techy. So I was like, yeah, gunslinger,
Is
because you could
it
still use like spears and stuff, and, like because you're a
was it
fighter.
Alien versus Predator 2 that the shoulder mounted cannon got damaged? So he like pulled it off and he like just kind of clicked it out and it became like he was using it like a revolver or something like that, or he gave it to someone
I think
and he
so,
was
maybe.
I want to say it was Alien versus Predator 2. Uh
Because in Alien vs Predator, they just give that the last like scientist that's left, they like give her a predator spear. No, they don't give her a predator spear. She kills an alien, and the predator rips the alien's head off, and cuts its tail spike off, and makes her a spear out of the tail spike, and like a shield out of the skull.
yeah, because the aliens are immune to their own acid.
Yeah, yeah,
He like squeezes the acid blood out and shows her that it's unaffected. But yeah, and they get the head. I remember that alien or that predator, I should say, dies,
yeah.
and she's standing over his body, and then the big ship decloaks, and they're all standing there, and the head guy gives her a spear, holds it out, and he collapses it, and he gives it to her as a gift for helping or fighting
Because
alongside them or whatever.
she's got the hunter mark on her cheek.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man.
There's a
Like
real
I know they're not great
yeah.
movies, but it's fun. Like it's fun stuff.
There's some really cool like comic books in that like kind of universe as well, where they've done Batman versus the Predator, and they've done there's like a Predator comic where a Predator comes to Earth. I want to say in like during like the age of piracy, so I want to say it's like the 1700s or the 1600s or something like that. But he has like a duel. He either has a duel with a pirate, or there's like he's hunting aliens, or like, I think like aliens get implanted in the pirate's crew, and he's like the only survivor, and he like kills an alien, and like the predator kills the rest, and then the predator I think he gives him a gun, and then the pirate guy gives him like a flintlock, and they kind of go their separate ways, and that's the flintlock that the predator gives to is it Murtaugh? No, that's fucking Lethal Weapon. Gives to
Yeah,
the main character of Predator 2 when he leaves. Do you know they give him a flintlock pistol?
yeah, yeah. Because he
That's
beat the other predator, right?
yeah, because he
Yeah,
beat the other Predator. That's from that Predator comic. That's like
that's cool.
that is really cool. Anyway,
Yeah.
we should probably actually get around to talking about
I
sci-fi.
honestly just want to talk about Alien and Predator all night.
Well, we can probably like filter that in or slip that into our general chat.
Just one last thing.
Okay,
One
yeah,
last thing.
yeah, let's go.
Was it in the second? I want to say it was the second movie. It might have been the first Predator. Which one was it that the Predator spoke and it actually turned to the protagonist and it called them a mother? Well, we're 7 minutes in. Are we okay?
We're 8 minutes in. I think I'm not sure, but we'll go with it.
Good luck.
I think that might have been the first one, because in the first one, doesn't like Arnie's like you're one ugly motherfucker, and then like at the end of the film, he's like blowing himself
Oh,
up.
maybe it is.
He like sets the risk on it to blow up, and he's like motherfucker.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, that's a
You're,
last
yeah.
Predator question done.
Okay,
Okay.
you're gonna be bleeping a lot.
Oh,
Yeah, I think we have to be 10 minutes before we can say fuck. So, oh, sorry, there's another one.
look, here we are.
Yeah, sure, look, it'll be grand.
You two grow up. This is life, okay? People say bad words
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly, and some of those are the best words.
Exactly.
I know.
Uh,
I almost said a swear word. That
You-
would
I know you were.
I would definitely get it pulled. Yeah, but Connor. So important question here. To getting a bit serious, but still fun. Is sci-fi fantasy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we classify them differently. Because one tends to be like, I think it's like a maybe like a slider or some sort of like four-way axis spectrum kind of thing or something like that. Maybe you could put them on, but like, I think we classify them differently. But realistically, a sci-fi setting, which is science fiction, where you kind of push the boundaries and you add in force fields and laser guns and stuff like that. Stuff that maybe it's possible. We don't know because we haven't successfully made proper holograms or force fields or anything like that yet. But as it is based on the now in our current time, that is a fantasy. It's a fantasy to have a laser gun. Like it's a fantasy to have a lightsaber. It's a fantasy to have a force field that surrounds you. So I think that, yeah, I think that the degree in which you push the boundaries of science with science fiction can absolutely make it a subgenre of fantasy. Although, again, I know people typically classify them as almost two polar opposites, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree with a lot of what you said there. And like personally speaking, I very much fall into the same camp as a booktuber I watch is very good, Daniel Green. And
I know him, yeah.
He calls it science fantasy, I believe, or like I think something like that. He always just kind of references it, but he considers it basically, it absolutely is just another branch of fantasy. And like, yeah, I would very much look at it in a similar way, in that I would say, you know, all sci-fi is fantasy, but not all fantasy is sci-fi.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at certain things as well, like, there's this idea that, again, like that they're polar opposites, that they're two separate things entirely. But I mean, you could look at stuff even like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm pretty sure there's a point in the first Thor movie.
I think I know the exact quote you're about to say. Go ahead. And
I can't quote it word for word, but Thor talks about. They talk about the Bifrost and talk about all the kind of the quote unquote magic that they have.
Yeah.
And I think Jane says something to him about that. He's like, well, it's not magic. I mean, it's just very advanced technology. You might perceive it as magic because you can't make sense of it yourself, you know, but it is not. Like, if I went back in time now to the 1400s and I would, look, here's a smartphone, I'm going to record you talking and I'm going to play it back for you, it'd burn me as a witch.
Yeah. You could literally just go back and go, see this, look, click, light, burn it.
Yeah, true.
Like,
exactly. You don't even need to show them like video recording or anything like that. Like, just even if you had a phone that just lit up, if you just took your lock screen.
I meant a torch. I meant you could bring a battery-powered torch back with you and get burned alive for that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, so, like, I think, if you go far enough into the future, or back into the past comparatively, I mean, like, any science, even if it can be rationally explained as a science, and there's reason to why this thing functions this way, in the eyes of someone who can't possibly grasp that, it's definitely it's more fantasy to them, it's more magic. So
yeah, totally. There's a quote I was thinking of, and I can't remember where it's from or who said it. So if someone is listening to this and they know, please do inform me and remind me. But the quote is that any sufficiently advanced science is almost indistinguishable from magic.
Yes, that sounds very familiar. But yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, like, if it's far enough ahead, or again, well, I think I have the
which is
the Thor one here,
which is really fun actually, because it's something we've been talking about. I recently started reading The Wheel of Time after watching the show. By the way, started the second book yesterday.
Nice.
But I've not read a whole bunch ahead or into the lore stuff, but I've just heard apparently there are theories that the Wheel of Time takes place in a far, far flung Earth, based on the ruins of old civilizations that pop up in the show, and that all of the magic is in fact like really, really highly advanced, like biotech. And that's why certain people can do magic and certain people can't, because they have like stuff in them that they are unaware of, because it's like a kind of genetic biotech that's passed down. Now, I don't know all of it. That's just the general theory.
Yeah.
I really like that. I really, really like that. It's
is
really
that
cool.
I thought that was official canon. Is it not? Is it not an idea that, what was it? I was watching a thing about it the other day, and the Wheel of Time, does it have 6 or 7 spokes? I think it has 7 spokes, right? On the wheel?
God, you know what? I'm honestly not sure. I think so. A lot of the time they just refer to it as the wheel. Like, it's a spinning wheel.
Yeah,
and it weaves the threads of fate.
Exactly, yeah. But like, it supposedly has like either 6 or 7 spokes. Again, I haven't read the stuff, but I have a very brief idea. And each spoke is a different age. And supposedly, and time is like cyclical, so things will come back around. And everything that has happened in human civilization thus far is still just the first spoke. So just to give an idea how far ahead that this Wheel of Time series supposedly takes place, that it's, whatever,
Yeah.
it's an Earth that's that far gone. Yeah, so everything that has happened so far is supposedly meant to be just the first spoke. Sorry, I actually pulled up a Thor. There's a Thor quote
Oh,
here.
please go ahead.
So it's Thor saying, "Your ancestors called it magic, but you call it science. I come from a land where they are one and the same."
Ah,
So,
yes. Yeah. No, that's a really dope quote, and I like that approach with D&D as well. And I think there's a lot of room in D&D to just go straight sci-fi with it, because again, it is just another branch of fantasy. It's like
Absolutely.
it's like using Oni and using like frost giants. They're all fantasy. One's Japanese, one is Nordic. They all just together into fantasy.
Yeah, and like when it comes to like a lot of sci-fi stuff in D&D, well, I mean, like I feel like the distinction between sci-fi and particularly with D&D, because D&D is very fast and loose with stuff like that.
Yes.
Depending, of course, how you run your game. Some people might run their games as really hardcore, gritty medieval stuff where like you're being historically accurate to like that dark ages and stuff like this, and most people can't read and all this other stuff, but the distinction between like if you have a wand that can shoot fireballs at people, at 120 feet and do a D10 fire damage, versus a quote unquote plasma pistol that can shoot a fireball 120 feet and a D10 damage. Is there really that much of a difference? Like it's the difference between like arranging circuitry in a little metal or case or whatever to fire a firebolt, or weaving like complex spell components to enchant a stick to do the same. They accomplish the same task, and I feel there's a lot of potential overlap if you break it down to its base components.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And like I know some people, like I'm kind of like a part of the inspiration for this was that I have actually, just as I was saying kind of before we started recording, in my most recent session I wanted to give my guys more of like a lore and exploration kind of like mini arc within the arc, so like maybe 1 to 2 3 sessions at most, of just kind of a little flavor of like exploration and learn more lore and just kind of feel more steeped in the actual arc. And I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to do that, and so I was kind of humming and hawing, and I was like, what if I give the main bad guy like another lackey, like a mini boss? And I was like, well, what could that mini boss be? And then I was trying to think of names. And when will this go out? Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, so the mini, because it'll probably be next session they'll encounter, they'll get some info on him. But the mini boss, I was like trying to come up with a name, and I was like, a good name for like a giant mini boss. And I was like, oh, Mimir. And then I was like, oh, Mimir, the man who knows everything in the world from Norse mythology. So
yeah.
Oh, that'd be a really good name for like an evil giant scientist / shaman.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I'm basically taking a hardcore bend into like Doom style sci-fi in the middle of my like frost giant like floating sky island city arc. At the moment, and like I'm really really excited by it. Like because like even like Doom I think in particular works particularly well for like inspiration for D&D sci-fi, because it's sci-fi but it's all fucking demons. Yes, I was checking the time.
I noticed.
Yeah, but like it's literally like all demons, and even like the Doom guy, you're this like huge hulking roided out monster inside power armor with like a laser sword and chainsaw and a wrist blade that shoots up out of your foot. But like you go through it, and as you go through, particularly in the first game, because I haven't actually played the second one for shame, but through the first game, you intermittently throughout the thing, you will see these like demonic little stones that you can touch, and they're sort of like the can't remember the name of them in Skyrim, but they were those like places of power where you could go and just like touch a stone and get a power up.
It's really funny that you would that you didn't know the exact name, but you called it a place of power, because there's like literally almost a 1-for-1 replica in The Witcher 3, and they're called places of power in The Witcher 3.
I must be I'm just such a good DM.
they're standing stones that are like maybe 6 or 7 feet tall, and then they just have a hole punched through the top of them.
Oh, that's weird. That's what I saw in my head when I was saying it, and I haven't played a whole bunch of The Witcher 3, so...
Well, no, that's because it's the same thing in both The Witcher and in Skyrim. In Skyrim, I can't remember what they're called. They're called... They're the ones that has like the thief, the serpent, the tower, all the different constellations on it, and you get bonuses from them.
Yeah.
And in The Witcher, you get a skill point if you go up to it,
Yeah.
and then a temporary bonus for like the next day or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that you actually called it the exact thing. It was in a different game.
Yeah, that's gas. But anyway, the reason I bring it up is because you go through and you see things like these, and you can touch them, and you get a little bit of lore about what's going on, and kind of thing. And what they are like the record. I think they're either like essentially like a demonic holy book, but like, and I think it's like the book of the Doomslayer or something, and it's the story of how you became the Doomslayer. And the first one you touch goes into this like real slow but awesome like growls narration about how like the like demons were like they only fear one person's the Doomslayer, boiled in blood. He traverses the shadowy plains of hell, making demons scream in fear and flee. And like as you go along, you pick that up, and like Doom is so hardcore sci-fi, but that is so fantasy and so like occult D&D. I like it's such a good mix. Like it's so good.
That would be a really cool take, actually, if you were to do like a very Hells / Abyss heavy campaign, and just make them all hardcore Doom demons. Because like there's a cool thing when they did a Descent into Avernus, they re-released a lot of miniatures, but they made them Legion variants. So you had like things like Chain Devils, Bone Devils, Ice Devils, stuff like that. But instead of having
they had like gnolls as well, wasn't it? It was like gnolls of Yangu or something.
No, they were the ones that were invading Avernus. Avernus is the top level of, or Avernus, whichever one you want to call it, is the top level of the Hells. And because it's basically the front door you need to get through to get to the lower level. That's where the demons from the Abyss are always trying to invade in the Eternal Blood War struggle. And so the Yagnu Gnolls are there invading and fighting and stuff. But then all the demons are called like Legion Bearded Devil and Legion Bone Devil, and they all have these like that cover their eyes entirely, but they can still see. And they have like armor plates and stuff like that to distinguish them from normal ones. These guys are specifically part of the Legion that is defending Avernus from the onslaught of demons.
I really need to reread Avernus. It's a very cool book.
It is, but you could totally do something like that with all the heavy sci-fi demon stuff that you have. Like what like instead of just saying they have different armor, why not absolutely be like, oh yeah, these demons, and in keeping with sci-fi, why not say like these demons that are or these devils, I should say, are invading your own material plane, and instead of carrying crossbows or bows or anything like that, if you go to like
there's like the antimatter rifle and stuff like that.
Yeah, from chapter 9 of the Dungeon Masters Workshop.
There's also it's more insane bigger brother from Fizzbands, which is it's a gun with a dragon scale in it. It's called something.
It's a yellow dragon scale specifically. I can't remember what it's called.
It's like the Amethyst Destroyer or something like that. Or
I'm gonna bring it up.
I got it. It's the Topaz Annihilator.
There you go.
Yeah, and it does crazy damage.
Yeah, it does crazy damage, and it lets you cast Disintegrate like once a day.
Yeah.
Like, why not have all of these things coming through, and they're using antimatter rifles, they're using laser rifles instead, and then they're just blasting you with energy rays, and that would make perfect sense because again, D&D can be very fast and loose with what is fantasy and what is sci-fi, and you could absolutely, because they're technically from an entirely separate world and they can open portals onto your plane. Why not have these guys come through with these advanced demonic laser rifles that have like skulls for faces, and they just shoot lasers out of their mouths or something like that?
Have you? Oh, sorry, just thought. Have you watched Invincible on Prime?
I was literally just thinking about it. Yeah, the guys that come through the portals.
Yeah, the Flarkins. Yeah, I was thinking that would be a really cool setup for like demonic invasions, where the first portal opens and they just send through like, I don't know, like mains or something, or like really low tier.
Yeah.
And that's purely for like a reconnaissance mission to scout the power level of the people they're attacking. And then the next one opens and they send in like chain devils. And then the next one opens and it's a pit fiend. Like, oh, that would be so fun. Ooh, I might have to write that down after the podcast for a possible campaign too. Oh God, But that was.
I think it'd be seriously cool. And like again, D&D has so much of this. I feel like again because of the line between when you really think about it, the line between fantasy and sci-fi is is very blurred. It doesn't have to be such a stark a black and white
Yeah,
difference.
the line isn't a
And
line;
even
it's a circle. And
yeah, like Mind Flayers, for example. Mind Flayers are so quintessentially D&D. They're one of the most core monsters, in my opinion. I feel like Beholders, Mind Flayers, Dragons,
giants.
Giants probably form this little I was going to say a triangle. It's more of a square now. Of core monsters, I feel, that come up in D&D. Hunting giants goes back to like fairy tales, like Jack and the Beanstalk. Dragons are pretty much existent in every single culture
Yeah.
around the world. Go and have a look at our dragons video for that. And then like you have like you've them. What's it? Giants, Mind Flayers. Oh, Beholders are like one of the core D&D monsters that were made for D&D, but they're so centered. They're on the cover. And then Mind Flayers are your far realm, eldritch horror kind of thing. And I feel like that's such an important cornerstone. But Mind Flayers to me are always like, they're aliens. They're straight up aliens that will abduct you in D&D.
Yeah, and that's I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was something I wanted to get to later, and it's probably a good time to maybe talk about it now. Is the Far Realm? Because like I was going to say, Joe, I was going to ask you the question. It was going to be a little bit of a bait question, to be honest. It was going to be like, is there a place for sci-fi in D&D? And if you said no, I would ask what your opinion of the Far Realm is, which is canon in D&D, and that's basically space.
Oh yeah. It's the realm beyond realms. It's very much a kind of like it is space. There's like energy and rocks and gaseous what's the word, nebulas and stuff floating around, and it's all just chaos and utter madness. And then the weirdest, most bizarre creatures come from it. Again, aliens.
Aberrations are so easy to turn into aliens. It's not even fun.
Exactly. I mean, like all you need to do really, like, you don't have to do anything. Like, look at take for example Baldur's Gate 3, right? There's a lot of Mind Flayer stuff going on in the first part of that. Actually, no, sorry, the whole game, because the whole game is about you being infected by one of the tadpoles. It's all
about you trying to get the tadpole out. Yeah.
And even that is so indicative of like Alien, which we talked about earlier episode. Hey, full circle. But yeah, it's so indicative of like Alien, which is one of the most popular sci-fi horror movies of all time.
100%.
Where you're infected with this thing, and you only have so long before you will turn or whatever, or it'll burst out of you.
There's some great opportunities for like body horror in sci-fi as well. And obviously make sure that, like, because some people really are not good with body horror, so I would say if you're going to do that, make sure maybe like during a session 0 you would find that out if they're comfortable with that kind of stuff. But there is a great opportunity to like, oh my god, the Ashley Johnson's one shot, the Nautilus arc.
Yeah, that was really, really cool.
Oh, that may be like my favorite Critical Role one shot at a like period. Like, she's such a good DM, and the way she like DM'd like the ship Mother all the way through, so good. And like, just as well, that's perfectly what I meant as well. It's like that whole thing is it's Alien as a D&D one shot. That's exactly what it is. And even the creatures are very similar to like the Alien, particularly from like the later Alien films, like a strong like Alien Covenant vibes from the bits where like the creature would like scratch them, and like black goo would like crawl across their skin and up their nose or in their ears. Like, if you go turn to a player and you go make a con save and they fail the con save, and you go, it reaches its finger out to you and touches you on the face, and part of its skin sloughs off, and you can feel legs grow from it and begin to crawl across the surface of your own skin towards your ear as you're frozen in terror. You feel it crawl up the side of your jaw, around your ear and into the hollow there, and you can feel it push its way through until suddenly it just disappears and you don't know where it is anymore. Like, oh my god, if that happened to me, I would like, oh god, like skin crawly. Like, that's like, there's just so many great opportunities for that in there. But yeah, the Fire Realm and Mind Flayers and all that, I think like that being there, it's basically Wizards going, just doing, if you want to turn this into like Star Wars and Alien combined, go, by all means, go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I can't remember exactly when it was, but one of the early AD&D adventures or expansions was that you are strolling along with your adventuring party in the forest, and literally this big metal object falls out of the sky, and you as a a medieval knight or wizard, don't really know what it is, but you as a person who's playing the game is like, that's a fucking spaceship. And you know what it is. That's a spaceship. It has big engines, smoking engines at the back of it, and it goes opens, and this little ramp appears, and you walk inside, and the inside's all smooth and clear, and there's little bleeping, blooping lights and everything, like it's a spaceship.
Close Encounters of the Third Edition kind.
There you go. There's Micflayers, I think, are so, and if you look at Baldur's Gate 3 and you watch that opening intro, which by the way is just so cool
so
looking, but like that is literally about an alien abduction, you know. The Nautiloid.
You basically get probed, yeah.
You do, because what happens in that whole trailer is that you watch the Mind Flayer hovers in the laboratory chamber thing, and then I love how when he wants to control the Nautiloid, it's not buttons or anything like that. He grabs two tentacles, he kind of touches them together like Avatar style, and they interlope, and then he pulls them like a string on an instrument. It goes bump. And then that's how he activates it. It's so cool. But that happens. He appears, or rather, they appear above a city. I think it's Baldur's Gate. And immediately, these tentacles go down, and they start snapping people up. And these people start appearing in the ship in pods, like aliens that have abducted people would.
It's very War of the Worlds, actually, the remake one, where all the aliens are tuned. There's all these tendrils are coming down and grabbing
all the tripods.
Yeah.
It is absolutely, and like when I ran Mind Flayers in our first campaign through a fairly long arc in the middle of our campaign.
I did actually want to talk to you about that because I really enjoyed that. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, you feel free to check out episode 2 of our podcast, where we talk about this story in far more detail. But I basically had it that they were appearing in the dark. Not always though. But I had these Mind Flayers. They had a crashed. It was essentially a crashed, like Mind Flayer assault carrier or cruiser or whatever, dreadnought, whatever you want to call it, in the Underdark. And they had little scout ships that I based off of the puddle jumpers from Stargate Atlantis, and I based all of their technology off of the Wraith from Stargate Atlantis, where it's all like bioorganic or biotechnological stuff. So it's all the insides of their ship are partially metallic but also partially fleshy and soft, and when you want to interact with one of their consoles, you literally stick your hand into this like soft membrane, and it links your neural system with the neural system of the ship. And yeah, we had some great stuff there, because you guys were able to, you could just think, I want to know this answer to this question, and then the ship would be like, this is the answer. But I was specifically in that arc, I knew that the elder brain of this colony was the ship's central computer. And like every time you pose a question, this elder brain is like, this is the answer to the question. And I was being very careful with what you were asking, because I was waiting for you guys to be like, ask something that like no Mind Flayer on the ship would need to ask, like where's the bridge? If you would ask something like that, it would have been like, well, the elder brain would have been like, wait a second, everyone on this ship knows where the bridge is. Why would you ask a question like that? And that did happen. At a couple of points, you guys started poking around and asking too many questions, and the elder brain was like, who's asking these questions? And kind of like, they get fed into your network and try to overcome you. And I think it made Shamash like catatonic for a short while, because it realized, hey, you're not meant to be in here. And then it kind of gave him this system shock where he got stunned for an extended period.
I think it was an hour.
It was like an hour. So you guys had to carry him off the ship, yeah, and retreat for a little bit. And he was like, it's because the elder brain realized, and also the elder brain then also gathered information from him, because their neural networks, their brains were linked. So it was like, oh, we're on the same network. You might be getting information from me, but at the same time, I'm getting information from you.
Should have used a VPN.
It should have used a VPN. And now a word from our sponsor. No.
Hey, I use Nord. If they want to sponsor us, I will not object.
But yeah, it's so like I think I played that super sci-fi stuff. I even had their big ships and their small ships were able to even like
you
go
did,
through.
You did actually back to you did facehuggers. You did facehuggers in that arc.
I kind of did. Yeah, I did. What I did was I can't remember what else there were. It was a combination of facehuggers and something else. I think it might have been like Resistance, the video games.
Yeah, they were like mechanic. Like in my head, the the memory I have that they were kind of like almost like mechanical, like grasshoppers or like some like mechanical insects, and then they
I
would.
think I call them scarabs.
Yes, sorry, that was it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and what would happen is when the big reason that they were trying to find the Drow City down here, and the Drow City is hidden, and it's specifically very careful about being hidden because they know there's mind flayers, and if the ship's able to basically jump through warp space or slip space or whatever you want to call it, and it can basically teleport from place to place. And when they eventually found it, the ship just appeared, just went and
Mm.
appeared above the Drow City in the cavern that it was in. And the first thing they did is they launched these swarms of scarabs that would go down, and they would basically fly up to people and attach themselves to the people's face, and then it would like incapacitate them. And they're kept alive, they're breathing, they're healthy, but they're purposely being incapacitated so that they can be hoisted and gathered up and then used as food or whatever for the mind flayers. Um, and yeah, so they were kind of facehuggery, kind of. I think I'm almost certain there are swarms, and they might be called scarabs in Resistance, the first game, and it's how the main character gets infected.
Right.
And they basically just swarms of insects that fly around, and they'll fly into the people, and then they'll nest inside of you, and you will turn into a chimera eventually. But in this case, they're just for incapacitating you, so that you can, so that the mind flayers can then come by, pick you up, and bring you back to the ship.
I'm trying to decide what's worse between what you've just described and the facehugger. Because with the facehugger, it like clamps onto your face and forces a fleshy tube down your throat and spits an egg out into your belly. With that thing, a literal insect forces its way into your mouth and down your mouth with all its sharp, pointy pieces. Like,
Yeah,
they're both absolutely horrendous. But do you know what? I think I may take the facehugger over that.
the facehugger is less pointy.
Yeah, literally only for that.
Yeah,
then it gets very fucking pointy on the way out.
oh yeah. um, but yeah, so I went very heavy sci-fi on that arc. There was an Elder Brain was a central computer for the ship. You guys were able to interact with their technology either by using fleshy membrane consoles or by sitting into chairs that would, similar again, Stargate Atlantis, sitting into chairs that would link your neural network with whatever you're trying to operate. So like you would try to fly the little shuttles, little mind flayer shuttles that they had. And in doing that, you basically became the shuttle. Like I always described to Mike as Shamash that when he sits into the chair and, you know, links with the ship, you no longer see out of your own eyes. You just see and feel as if you were the ship, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, but I went heavy sci-fi on that, and it was one of my favorite arcs from our first campaign. But like, it's obviously drastically different from everything else we did in that campaign, which was heavily fantasy in the traditional sense, based, you know, medieval kind of stuff.
I remember the ending of that arc being like incredibly Doctor Who. Like everything looked incredibly dire, and then just like literally from Shamash's just sheer intelligence, he was able to like just completely shut down all the mind flayers and their plan, and it was just so Doctor Who. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And like, oh god, just as well, I think when you do certain sci-fi things, you can give characters and players opportunities within that they wouldn't necessarily have maybe in a more traditional fantasy thing. Like if you do have someone like, because I was thinking about it there, a lot of people get weird about guns in D&D.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a similar issue that people have with sci-fi in D&D, in that some certain people's view of like D&D is that it should be very, very like swords and sorcery, or like very much like that medieval European fantasy. And like,
Yeah.
this also feeds it. It's also a similar reason why people have issues with the monk, which I get even less. Like, but yeah, I just
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean by issues with the monk? I'm getting defensive here. What's happening with the monk?
there are people out there who have issues with the monk class being in D&D. They say it does not fit.
Oh, because it's like not European. It's more of an Eastern kind of. It's like more like a martial artist from like China or something like that, like a Shaolin monk, than it is a European monk in brown robes who's flaying themselves.
It's basically people just don't think it fits in because it's Asian. That's basically it, really.
Yeah. Well, okay.
And I would say,
Here's my own hot take response to that. Fuck off.
yeah, I was gonna be like, fuck you, I have the power of God and anime on my side. Have you ever seen that video? Please tell me you've seen that video. Otherwise, that reference makes me look like an absolute.
It sounds familiar. What video is this?
It's this video of like there's this like little kid in a school, and I think he's being like bullied or something, or someone slags him and they're filming it, and he like either squares up or pulls out like a foam sword and goes like, "I will defeat you because I have the power of God and anime on my side."
There's I think I've seen it. There's another one my mind went to when you mentioned anime, and which is it's a college humor one, and it's an animated thing, and there's a couple, and they're just like they're like, what should we watch today? Maybe we should try anime. You know, what's a good anime to watch? And some guy with a ponytail and like kind of stubble and stuff kind of comes out, and he's got like a waifu t-shirt on, and he's like, he comes out of nowhere, and he's all like, you guys are such anime noobs. You don't know what anime is. And they're all like, well, can you tell us some good anime to watch? He's like, I will, but first I'll tell you about my story. And then he gives them his backstory, and the opening line is, you see, I didn't have any parents. Well, I did, but they didn't get me. And it cracks me up every time because he's trying to be angsty, and he's trying to be that angsty Sasuke style character when he's like, I didn't have any parents. Well, I did, but they just didn't get me. And he tells how anime was his life, and it's the thing that gave him hope and power. And then some other guy comes in who looks a lot like Rob Lee, and they just argue about what animes are good and which ones are not. And at one point, one of them gets a good counterpoint on the other guy when they're arguing, and like three anime girls, like Misty is one of them from Pokemon, and two others, I can't remember who the other two are, come in, and they're like doing that thing where they stand with one leg kind of bent up in the air and stuff, and their eyes are hearts, and he's like, thank you, my waifus. It's on. I'll send you this later. It's one of the funniest. Every time it comes up, and I mean multiple times, I send it to Tara, because Tara is obviously more of an anime person than I am,
Yeah.
and I send it to her every time. And the final line in it is, at one point the couple are like, they're like, oh, maybe we could watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. That looks really good. And both guys go mental, and they're like, it's made in America.
Yeah, and you know what? That same kind of attitude where people are like, "Oh, it could be anime. It's made in America." Well, it's more of the aesthetic and the style, really.
True. Also, it was actually animated in Korea.
Yes, unreal. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's the same kind of thinking with people being like, "You can't have guns in D&D. You can't do sci-fi in D&D. The monk shouldn't be in D&D." Like, no, I would say your view of what constitutes fantasy is too narrow. Like it's D&D. The point of D&D is you have an entire world that you can create on your own, and you could pull from anything and everything to make it as cool and customized and exactly what you want out of a world to tell your story in. And I think if you just instantly go, right, this can't be in D&D, this can't be in D&D, monks, maybe. I'm like, but you just wait, like, that's like you go to a restaurant and they give you a steak and like all the greens and all the sides and stuff, and you're like, well, you know, this kind of vegetable, this doesn't really suit it, and they're gone, and then you're just left with like 2 sticks of celery when you had like a full steak there. Like,
Yeah.
why did you do this yourself?
Or worse, there's people that go one step further. So I came across this today on Twitter. I can't remember what the question was. It was some question someone posed, and I was going through the comments and seeing people's answers below. And one person was like, this is exactly why 5th edition isn't for me, and they cited some rule. And then someone responded and like, well, you know, if you don't like that rule, you can change it. That's kind of the beauty of D&D and stuff. And then someone else got really defensive, and they were just like, what was they said? They said, or you could just find like the game that suits you. And I'm like, well, yeah, absolutely. There's Pathfinder, there's Starfinder, there's Edge of the Empire Star Wars game, whatever, if you want to go more sci-fi.
I think there's another one called like Stars Beyond Number or something like that as well.
That sounds familiar. But yeah, like they were just like offering, you can absolutely go and you can get a different game if you want, but we talk about D&D on the channel. But like you can also you can tweak things if you don't like it. And don't get me wrong, it's okay to tweak certain things, or to say, hey, I don't like this little, like I don't like flanking, so we won't use flanking, or I think that this particular subclass feature shouldn't work this way, blah blah blah. That's okay to tweak certain things like that. Discuss it between the DM and player. Discuss what works for both of you. But if you're a DM who's like got an exceptionally narrow idea, because like I've seen people pitch their worlds, their D&D worlds, and they have a very specific idea of fantasy they want to do, and D&D doesn't always gel with that. And what they end up doing is they go, right, I think you've brought this up before about people who like had no spellcasters in their D&D world because they wanted like an.
That was the thing we were talking about yesterday, our last episode, and that was the opposite, or is that guy on Reddit who got tore apart because he was like, there's no fighting men in my world. No one trains with
yes,
weapons.
That was it. Yeah, no one uses weapons because magic is so prevalent. Yeah. Like, why would you bother? And it's like, because sometimes magic, because anti-magic field is a thing, and sometimes it's okay to just stab someone in D&D.
Still one of my favorite top comments on a Reddit thread I've ever seen. What do you call people who pick up a stick and hit the nerds in your world?
But like, I think okay, at that point, if you're looking at the game and you're like, oh, there's no magic in this world, so it's all just fighters and barbarians and rogues and whatever. At that point, yeah, you should probably just find a different game that suits you better. But I think it can be. I don't know. For me, I try to make D&D as accommodating as possible. And I'm okay with like I will make something fit. If you go, hey, I found this Unearthed Arcana, or I found this other thing, can I play this in the world? I'll have to do a review of it and myself and just check and see is it balanced or whatever. But for the most part, I'm happy to make anything fit into the world. If one of you came to me and was like, hey, for my next I want to play a Warforged, but he's from outer space, and he literally falls out of the sky, Master Chief style, and crashes into the earth, or like the Iron Giant, and he wakes up and he's like, I do not know my programming, and he speaks like a robot, and he does all the classic sci-fi tropes. I would be like, yes, let's make this happen. That's definitely like I would make it fit. So I think it's important to be accommodating.
Oh, do you know?
To and have a flexible idea of what if you're too specific, like I don't know. I tried to run a campaign simultaneously with our first campaign for my soon-to-be brother-in-law and a couple of friends, and we actually had a lot of fun and it was great. But the problem was they found themselves in They found themselves in a kingdom where like magic users had been like your arcane magic users had been made illegal. Because there was clerics and paladins, but the arcane magic users were seen as heretics who were like, doing all this stuff. And the new king was like, we'll round up all these mages and we'll get rid of them because we're a holy, pure, pious country and all this stuff. And the first arc had them escorting a girl who could use magic. She was like a sorcerer. It had them escorting her out of the kingdom and just getting her to the border, essentially. And that was cool, but also I didn't realize until we kind of got into the thick of it that makes it very difficult just to play D&D if you're like anything magical is illegal in this country. Don't get me wrong, the concept is cool and I still like the idea of be religious fanatics that are like, oh no, only the magic. But it actually became a real thing because one of the guys wanted to play an air ganassi, and then he's like, oh, I'm like an inherently magical race. I mean, my hair floats around area and stuff. I'm obviously, and I can cast spells naturally. So am I going to be arrested? And I had to kind of bend the rules a little bit and stuff to be like, no, as long as you don't cast spells, people won't arrest you.
Yeah.
But realistically, like if they probably would, yeah. So like this is a bit off topic for sci-fi, but I'm just saying, don't be too restrictive in the idea of your world. Try to make things accommodate your players more so, because at the end of the day, you're trying to run a game for them, And
I think what you said about like just trying to be accommodating in general, that's just a good tip because like your player, like, as a DM, you build your world, right? You build your world, you lay it all out really, really nicely, and this goes here, and this goes here, and this goes here, and this goes here. And then you get 4 to 6 people to come along and they kick all the blocks over and go, this looks sick, man, I really like it. Can we have like a ninja dragon clan? And I'm like, well, this
was a European inspired thing.
I was going to be like, my Nordic survival themed fantasy is a bit in shambles now, but yeah, okay.
there is nothing wrong with the
Yeah.
concept of Viking monks. Okay.
Oh, but like, there's like, like to go with the Viking thing again, just again down the lines of being accepted. If someone wanted to do that, I'd be like, you know what, you absolutely can, because the Vikings made it to Russia, and if they can do that,
And America.
yeah, and America and Ireland and yeah, a lot of places. But like, yeah, and if they can do that in the real world where there's no magic and they just have to row and walk, where there is magic and airships and shit like that, yeah, absolutely, you can be a dragon monk in my Scandinavian fucking fantasy, like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, definitely. I think
Also, you give me a great idea for a sorcerer character with that like robot falling to earth thing.
okay. I'm
Chaos,
glad.
Chaos magic sorcerer. You play a warforged. Your component, your circuitry is damaged, and
Oh, really good.
yeah, so you're not actually able to do, like, half the time you're not actually able to cast it to the thing you want because your circuits are damaged, and maybe like
Yeah.
eventually you find someone who could fix you, and then you change your sorcerer arc subclass to a different thing because now you have control over the magic.
You could maybe do a thing that's
Like, this would be
where
like late game as well. Like, I'd say.
you could also do a thing where like your memory core has been damaged, so that you can make it. You could set a number. You could decide with your DM, let's set a number and be like, okay, I rolled a 12 or okay, I rolled a 10 on my intelligence, and I keep that. If at any point I can get enough ASIs to get to 15, I want to be able to unlock my
Ooh.
full memory core. Like, I've healed and I've remembered everything. That could be a really cool. That's a really interesting goal. Because you're not trying to do it in a roleplay fashion in game. You're literally trying to earn levels to progress so that you can bump up your ASIs and stuff like that. That could be super cool.
Like, if I was going straight by the books, like medieval European fantasy, to put it really, really limited, and someone came to me with that idea, that's too good an idea and too fun a concept for a character for me to be like, it doesn't really fit in my world. I'd be like, no, do you know what? There's a genius inventor no one ever knew about, and Tony Stark could build this in a cave. Like, you know.
Yeah, I think. I think be accommodating. It's nice to have a good idea of what themes you want to explore in a campaign as a dungeon. What kind of quests you want to come up, what the setting is like, what the people are like. Definitely really important. But I also think that you need to be like at the moment, Mike is playing a turtle. The entire continent of Valthrun is essentially Europe. The further south is more Mediterranean in nature. You're in the central part, which is like France.
Yeah.
You go north, you have like a Viking, Celtic Irish kind of thing going on.
That was my
It's
fault.
just it. But even then, like that's the thing as well. And again, we're getting off sci-fi, but like you came to me at the start of this campaign, and I had a rough map drawn. I'm like, okay, I think I want like 3 kingdoms in this section and maybe a couple others down here, and I'll probably put like this island might be some sort of city unto itself. And I had all these ideas, but nothing really filled in. And then you were like, hey, I'm going to play my character Lug that I played a few campaigns back when I was going to play him differently in a different class. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. And then you were like, okay, look, so he's a Celtic warrior. He's covered in tattoos. This is like his people's culture. They're like a warrior clan kind of thing. And I was like, awesome. Okay, I guess I'll just make this kingdom right here into like the Irish Celtic Viking thing. And that's what we did. And it works great because, I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, does it make sense that there is a very, very Celtic Irish Viking kingdom right here, and then as soon as you cross the river, you're in like an 18th century France setting? Absolutely not. But we don't care because it's fun.
Yeah, it's fantasy. People can choose different
paths. There is a setting I wanted to talk about.
I might know, but go ahead.
So there's this. Oh, sorry. When I say setting, I mean it's not a D&D setting, but I know the one you're. I think I know the one you're. We can talk. There is a game I played in my teen years, which was had such interesting, unique world building. The like of which I don't think I've really seen yet in terms of originality. So there is a series of RTS games, mostly on PC, called Rise of Nations. And they're based in like real world stuff. But they had, in the same way that Age of Empires had an Age of Mythology game, where you got the magic-y or fictional version of it.
Build the Hydra.
They were so powerful, Hydra. But in the same way as that, Rise of Nations had an offshoot game called Rise of Legends.
Ooh.
It was. I picked this up on a whim. I was down on my summer holiday. I was in Kerry. Myself and my family were in Dingle, but we went to Tralee for a day. I came across I want to say it was a game, actually, not even GameStop, a game store.
Oh, that's going back.
Yeah, and I walked in and I went to the PC section and I found this game. And they had all this cogs on the front of it and all this like magical energy. And I looked at the back and it was like, oh, there was things like genies and clockwork men and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, this looks mental. So I bought it. I couldn't play it for like another 10 days until I got home from my house. But as soon as I did, into the drive, installed that, let's go. And it was an amazing game. It's called Rise of Legends. You basically start off in there's three regions. You start off in a place, I forget what the name of it is, but it's inhabited by a race of people that want to say they're called the Vinci. The Vinci or the Vici or something like that. I'll bring it up in a sec. Of Legends. And you start off there, and they are like steampunk / Da Vinci punk Italians, essentially.
Okay.
So everything they have clockwork men, which are like these like I don't know, 18-foot tall clockwork soldiers that kind of hobble along, and they have gears and cogs that are all visible and exposed, and they have like electricity weapons. They have like musketeer like fusiliers with like plumage on their helmets, cogs and stuff on their armor. They have helicopters, but they use the Da Vinci screw propeller.
Oh, that's cool.
And stuff. And then they have a bunch of other stuff as well. And you start off in there, and you're chasing this guy called, wait for it, his title is the Doge. And this was before the meme. This was way before the meme.
That's an Italian word, and it's actually Doge.
Is it Doge?
Yeah.
They call it Doge in this. That's what I went by. Okay, they're called the
but yes, let's continue to call it the Doge, because that's hilarious.
Yes, the Doge. And you play a guy named Giacomo. And basically you go. Did I mispronounce that as well?
Giacomo, yeah.
Giacomo, that makes more sense.
Giacomo. Sorry.
I'm going by what the pronunciations were when I played the game. All the voice actors called them these things. Okay?
Giacomo.
Giacomo. I swear to God, there was a guy in it. He sounded like, I don't know. What's the actor's name? You know, do you ever see
your audio just cut there? Sorry.
Did you ever see the Princess Diaries?
Maybe.
Anne Hathaway. There's a bodyguard in it. He might have even been the voice actor. I don't know, but it sounds like him. And he literally calls him Giacomo. Yeah, he says it like that. It's terrible. Okay, so that's the first region. Okay, it's heavily there's pipes and there's steam towers. There's cannons that are like mounted on the back of all these things. There's clockwork spiders as well. There's loads of really, really cool stuff in this, right? And you
clockwork spiders. Regular spiders don't skeeve me out, but for some reason clockwork spiders really bother me. Yeah,
like the dwarven ones in Skyrim, were they?
I don't know. It's just something about it being mechanical and that it can like climb up onto you and can move across all surfaces and so for some reason regular spiders don't do that, but specifically like just mechanical spiders really freak me out.
So the first arc is you pursuing in a vengeance arc. You're pursuing this guy called the Doge of Venucci, and you're pursuing him the whole way. And once you conquer all the territories in this section, you face him in the capital city, and then he flees to a different section, where it's basically a Middle Eastern like Arabic motif, and it's inhabited by a race of people called the Aline. And they basically have genies and giant scorpion mounts, and their cities are like floating like Arabic palaces in the sands.
That's sick.
And they have all these. The bad guys are made of dark glass, which is made from the sand. But you've glass spiders and glass warriors and all these things that you're fighting or fighting with. And they think that I'm looking here. They have salamanders, dragons, giant scorpions, and they use like scimitars and everything. So it's very, very Middle Eastern fantasy at that point. And then wait for this one. You get to the third region, which is like an Amazon jungle style thing. The civilization that are here are called the Quaddle. And
yes.
And they basically everything about them is very heavily Aztec. It's Mesoamerican, but it's more leaning in the Aztec
Yeah.
direction. So they have pyramids made out of stone, and they have like statues of jaguars and wolves and other stuff like that. And but what actually happened, and because it shows us in the open cinematic of the game, an alien spaceship crashed into this region, right? And then they built Aztec temples, which are basically highly technological, futuristic temples. Like so much so that there will be a pyramid like that, right? And then there'll be an inverted pyramid above it that is floating and slowly rotating, and that's a
really
building.
cool. That's really cool.
And they have these things like they have like golems that are like that have like they're all made of stone, but then they'll have these blue or red lines running along them that are pulsing with energy. And there's one that's like it's like a unique unit that you can get, and it looks like a wolf, but it's a symbol of the moon god, and he looks like a wolf, and he has these two moons that around him off his shoulders, and if he points his wrist at someone, his wrist kind of like disassembles into these floating components that are not attached, and he fires moonbeams at you out of his wrist. And the whole game is used going through these three arcs. It's one of the best RTSs I ever played. It's so unique. It's so cool. But yeah, and you get like they have cloaking devices, and they have airships. They have like fighter jets, but they look like if the Aztecs designed fighter jets.
Sick.
And they're shaped like crescent moons with tails coming off them, and they can hover in place and they fire. So you go from like steampunk, Da Vinci punk style setting into heavily magic style setting with giant monsters and genies and all this other stuff, and then you go into the third one, which is like taking one of the world's oldest civilizations, but flipping it on its head and saying, yeah, but they got alien laser and anti-gravity technology and cloaking devices and everything, and that's the third arc. It's one of the best. It's a really, really cool setting. It's absolutely bizarre, but it's the kind of it's stuff like that that really inspires me to want to put sci-fi in my D&D game.
Yes, and like I think as well, just for a DM, one of the best things you can do, in my opinion, anyway, as a DM, is to read, because you see how other people build their stories, build their characters. You'll get a ton of inspiration for a lot of stuff. It's literally 50% of the reason why I started reading The Wheel of Time was because I wanted a bit more inspiration for my DMing coming up, and I liked how the show kind of laid things out, and I knew if I liked how the show laid things out, I would like how the book laid things out even more. So I picked that up, and like, yeah, like I think like if you're not counting science fiction as fantasy and you don't want to associate it with D&D, I think there's just like worlds worth of inspiration that you are just not opening yourself up to, and I think that's a serious mistake.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big fan about sci-fi and fantasy.
Like I'm the horror guy, you're the sci-fi guy.
Oh yeah. I'm not going to tell people that they're wrong if they want to just run a medieval European Dark Ages style thing.
But you're right.
But like if you're playing D&D, I think just the very I think you can do it. I think you can play like a Game of Thrones style setting, and people can have like you could be a paladin and be like Barbarian, or a cleric like Taurus of Mir, or Melisandre. Melisandre could even be like a sorceress if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And you could just be a regular no magic fighter like Jon Snow or Robb Stark or something like that. Or you could be like Arya and be a rogue. You know that there's places totally built that are low magic. They are by no means, you're never going to find a magic item shop in this world. You know, you're never going to find someone who has an airship. But a world like Game of Thrones, which I think would probably inspire a lot of people because it's so popular, is totally possible, and I think it's fine to do. If that's what you want to aim for, by all means, I think that's fine. I just think that if you're kind of going off of a more in line with typical D&D setting, where like the like Faerun or something like that, like the Sword Coast, I think be open to the idea of weird stuff, and I think it can really enhance your game as well to have players come to you and be like, I want to play this super, and it's kind of sci-fi and it's kind of like futuristic, and maybe he comes from the future or something like that, and whatever. You can spin some really interesting stuff into your world, based on what your players pitch to you for their own characters. You know?
Hell yeah. And I think like as well, like Magic Punk is such just a fun aesthetic and kind of style and concept to play with.
Yeah.
And here's where I obligatory talk about Arcane for a few minutes. Uh, I'm sure like a lot of people have probably seen it. It's doing really, really, really well on Netflix now, and they're already in production of a second season. But Arcane, as well as just being a really, really amazingly built world, very much it's sci-fi, but it's magic, and the way they say it in it, so the magical technology that they use in the League of Legends world and in Arcane specifically is called Hextech, and it's basically these crystals that have magical energy in them, and by using them and certain setups in like literally like in certain they use it with machines to replicate the magic of like replicate the arcane is basically the point of it. It is magic powered by science is how one of the characters describes it, and that's such a fun concept. And because they discover this, then they have stuff like they have like these giant hex gates where they can, like you were saying earlier, a ship can just come up to it, it gets hit by a beam, it disappears, it pops out in a hex gate like half the country away and just comes up there, and then straight away they're using that for like transport of goods and war and like profit and like import export everything, and has this massive impact. And then but like all the way down as well, there's all these other kind of lower tech like sci-fi or more kind of chem punk kind of aesthetics then as well, where like people are using like alchemy and stuff to like power certain objects and items and stuff. It's all just, it's very, very well incorporated. And I would say if you're looking to do probably a bit more traditional fantasy but have that element of like, oh, it's fantasy but it's actually maybe like fantasy powered by science, like we were saying with the Wheel of Time, where there's that theory that like the reason everybody can like certain people can use magic and certain people can't is because they have like these biotech implants that they're unaware of. If you wanted to do something like that with your D&D world, Arcane is a really good source of inspiration for that, I think.
You actually, I haven't seen it yet. I'm currently finishing up the US office.
I'm still I've been badgering Conor about this for weeks.
I will, and it's the next thing on my list to watch. But you told me it's very on par with what I'm building for Asteria.
Yeah, it's very much of a similar vein. I would say it's definitely more magic. Like it's of a higher level of magic. Prevalence is what I would say in terms of like, because like there's magic everywhere in your world, but like say like in a normal city there won't just be like loads of magical stuff kind of floating about everywhere. Like the buildings aren't going to be using some like weird power source or something. Whereas in Arcane, like every aspect of daily life at one point integrates some aspect of technology, and that's powered by these Hextech crystals.
And I think I've seen stuff like that before. I was doing some research for guns in my world and how to kind of tweak them so that the technology makes sense and stuff like that. I feel like I bring this up weekly at this point.
Just every week, every week Gavin crits something. It'll be really like, I'm thinking about guns again.
I just nervous more and more. So guns now do a point of damage. But no, so, and I came across this person who had, I guess, I don't know about it, like they've been drawing their own world for like a novel they're writing or something.
Right.
But they had this art done out, and it was like kind of, they were rifles, they were like breech load rifles, but the bullets they were using were like, they were like crystals. They would load a crystal cartridge, and instead of firing a solid projectile, it fires like energy out of it. Because these crystal bullets just convert immediately into energy and fire out like a bolt. So
cool. Like a railgun almost.
Almost like a railgun, yeah. But it comes out like a blaster fire, Star Wars, with a little bit of energy. And I was just thinking, it was just really, really cool. And I think like I do think Arcane will be really cool for me like that. I think it'll definitely inspire me to just
very up
stuff.
Rally.
But I mean, like we said before, when it comes to the difference between sci-fi and fantasy, there really isn't one. And if someone says, "Hey, I want to use like a laser gun in this game or something like that," but you feel like you don't really want there to be like circuit boards and energy cells and stuff like that, just be like, okay, here's how it works. It's a magic item. It has X amount of shots a day, and it takes your action to use whatever. But just be like, make it like, oh, do you know what I have in my world actually, which is kind of, it's inspired by sci-fi, but I just gave it a magical version. is I have the elves in my world, the fire elves specifically, use spears, which are regular spears,
Yes.
but they can blast fire like a firebolt, and that's just a spear enchanted with firebolt. But that's the inspiration for that was the Jaffa staff weapons from Stargate. You know,
Yeah.
so like it's honestly the difference between what is fantasy and what is sci-fi is so arbitrary sometimes that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You know, you could find because you could very easily be like, okay, I'm wearing +1 armor, and at the end, the metal is enchanted with whatever, blah blah, blah gives me +1 strength. Maybe you're like, okay, this is made from the scale of a dragon, so now it's +1 armor because of tough dragon scales, and that's why it gets it, and that's your magical solution. But if you want to do the exact same thing in sci-fi, all you have to do is, yes, mechanically it's still a +1 armor, but that's because it has energy cells that project a force field around me.
It's
Give me
powered
additional.
armor. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like in terms of I know there's certain themes you might want to hit and stuff like that, but I mean like there's a way that you can give someone I don't know, I feel like it mechanically is more important in my mind about how things function. Whereas if someone's like I want to like if I'm an artificer and I want to build energy shield armor, I'd be like, yeah, let's do it. And it can and we'll say that the instead of circuits it has like runes that are carved. But I always describe runes on my magic items being like they're not just like I don't know symbols carved in. It's like coding. When you want to make a piece of magic armor in my world, you carve it full of like whatever draconic runes, giant runes, celestial runes, whatever. And when you're carving those in, it's like typing out code on a program, and that's how the magic functions because you're literally spelling out in code how it's meant to function for this armor. So I feel like there isn't really a whole lot of difference whether you're coding with arcane runes, ones and it comes out the same,
Yeah, I actually just thought of another really great example of like Joe how someone say Joe magic and science are pretty indistinguishable. Did you watch David Tennant's Doctor Who run?
Yeah. I watch from Eccleston up to Smith.
Excellent. Do you remember the Shakespeare episode in David Tennant's run?
Oh, vaguely.
So in the Shakespeare episode, they come across a species of alien witches, right? And
Right.
they use words. They basically use magic. They use magic to hurt people, right?
Yeah.
And there's a point where the doctor and his assistant and whatever the cat and Shakespeare all encounter them, and they kind of have a bit of a scuffle and get away. And they're like, "What the fuck? What are those?" And he was like, "Oh, these are these. They use combinations of certain words to cause effects that would happen." Like and then I think one of them was like, "Are you saying they use magic?" He's like, "No, it's not magic. It's science." It was like they you guys use numbers to split the atom. They use words. And I was like, "That's
exactly,
so good. That's so
It is.
cool."
It's things like that bridge magic and science so beautifully because it's like the Thor thing, if technology is like that, and if the doctor's like, oh yeah, you put ones and zeros in a certain combination, and your phone then plays no cat videos for you. Someone else puts words in Latin because why not in certain formations, and because of that they code a spell in front of you, which is basically what the verbal component to every spell in D&D.
Yes.
You say certain words in a certain order, and that's how you activate a spell. Because yeah, there's components to a spell which are verbal, somatic, and material. In the same way that you need material components for your phone, which is like I need the actual physical parts.
Yep.
I need verbal. Well, what would be your somatic components? Is like the mechanical movement, the moving parts inside, I guess.
I guess.
And then the
or
somatic components is like the
circuitry.
code.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Like I said before, I'm not going to tell people that my in my world it's a bit more standard D&D. It's dragons, swords, sorcery. That's fine. I'm just saying, don't discount the idea that you can have otherworldly, outerworldly stuff going on with energy weapons and force fields and all this stuff. Because I mean, they're there in spells already.
Absolutely. And like I was saying,
You can cast Wall of Force as a spell. Why can't you enchant a portcullis to drop down a wall of force, and be an impenetrable way into your castle just by carving runes all around the...
writing that down as an idea for the guild
I know.
hall.
I just put it in somewhere now.
No, that's getting added to the guild hall once we're allowed back in that city.
Yeah, I do have an idea for. No, I won't say it. I won't say it because I'll spoil something.
Okay, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I had an idea for like it's essentially starting something similar to that. It's sort of essentially like a magical bear trap, where it'd be like a pressure plate in the middle with these two wooden boards buried down into the earth, and when you step on it, the two boards slide up either side of you, and both boards are enchanted with conjure barrage.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, like when are we talking about the mind flare? You guys had the ship, the little scout
Yes.
ship you stole, and you had that for ages to get around. That ship had a quote unquote warp drive, which was essentially it had the ability to cast the spell teleport.
Yeah.
You know,
And we just had
I
to
mean,
feed sufficient spell slots into it, wasn't it?
yeah, Shamash could power it up by channeling his own magical energy into it by X number of spell slots, and that would basically charge the ship's systems. Because normally it would charge up by docking with the mothership, but in this case, he had to find a way to kind of retroact it. You ever see like someone whose car battery is dead, so they bring it into the house and hook it up with the little. My dad had to do that for a bike for his motorbike a few times.
I never heard of someone taking the battery all the way out. Usually, it's just bring your car over there for a sec, will you?
Well, yeah, I think I can't remember why he had to do it, but like normally with a car, you can just jump it off someone else and run the engine a bit, and it'll the dynamo will charge it back up. For some reason, he had the battery. I think he had to take the battery apart and put like fresh battery acid or something in it. I could be wrong on that.
What the
Don't quote me on this.
Okay.
But I remember passing through the dining room at my parents' house a couple times, and just in the corner wall socket, there was a thing plugged in, and it came off, and it linked up into red and blue
Jumper cables.
Jumper cables essentially, and they were clipped onto either side of the bike battery, and it was just sitting there on the little what do you call it, the bottom part of the mantle of the fireplace.
Charging my bike.
Yep.
Jesus. So Connor, I suppose we've kind of talked a lot about why you should use sci-fi in your D&D campaign, why you can and what's good at it. Do you have any tips for how to implement it, like easy ways or good kind of narrative conceits just to get that into your world? Because like once you already have it established in the world, it's a lot easier to kind of get over that hurdle and go ahead and okay, so now it's here, how does this affect this, and you can kind of logic out how that would affect the various things. But in terms of like just getting over the initial hurdle of introducing this like whole new branch of fantasy into your current fantasy, do you have any tips?
Okay, I'm gonna go for a trifecta here. I don't know what they are yet, but I'm gonna make it up as I go. So tip number one. Tip number one is just do it. Don't think about it too much.
Tip number one: Shia LaBeouf.
No, tip number one is just do it. I mean, the same way that you would just decide that a dragon lives on this mountain, or that this city happens to be on top of a volcano built in on. Just do it. Just decide that in this city, there is an inventor and he has invented firearms. There is this guy here and he's, I don't know, made a force field that surrounds the village. Because he's an elf that's lived here for 800 years and he's a 20th level artificer. Why not? I'd say just do it. Just do it. Worry about the how, or rather worry. Okay, so that's just do is my first point. Okay, this is gonna fall apart so fast. I already know it. Point number two. Worry about how it happens after the fact. So if you decide, if someone comes to you, point one again, someone comes to you and says, I want to do this, or if you're thinking, ooh, it'd be really cool if they had a force field in town, do it. Do it. Come up with what it's called and how it looks. Don't worry about the how. Point two, worry about the how. After the fact, after that, in your game, just make it happen. Do what you want to do, and then figure out how it works afterwards. So, So at that point, then you can decide, right? Well, this village has this force field technology, whatever, blah blah blah. Why does only this village have it? Why doesn't the next town over have it? Well, because it's not like, first of all, it's very expensive. Maybe this village is built on a mithril mine, and maybe mithril is quintessential to building the arcane runes that create the force field around the town. And also the 800-year-old elf that lives there has sworn he will never, or maybe the 800-year-old elf lived there, built it, and then died. So that's why no one else has it, because no one wants to go messing with it in case they break it and then they can't replicate it, and also they destroy the only one existent. There's the why. I literally came up with that in the spot. Point number 3 is see, I told you this is fall apart fast. Point number 3.
So, what was it? Just do it. Worried about the how later.
Point number 1 was just do it. Worry about the how later. Point number 2 was worry about the how.
Okay.
And point number 3 is have fun.
Have fun. Do you know what? Solid.
Have fun.
Solid.
Have fun. At the end of the day, I think have fun. Don't take it too seriously. That's it. Point number 3 is have fun. Don't take it too seriously. At the end of the day, it's a game. People are here to have fun. I totally wanting to build a world that makes sense. I fall into the trap all the time of trying to rationalize why X, Y, and Z happens in my world. Like I said a while ago, why is there a Viking Celtic culture and you cross the river and then suddenly you're in like Renaissance France? It makes no sense. But we get over it. We don't think about it too much because at the end of the day, it's fun to be able to travel 4 days north and all of a sudden you're in an entirely different kingdom with different culture and all this sort of stuff.
May I suggest a reason?
Go on.
Rosalia focused on societal progression and Caelda instead focused on military progression.
Yeah, maybe. Also, actually, if we're going to get dive into this, Caelda is like starkly traditional as well. Like really traditional. They don't even use like firearms, even though the firearms are fairly common knowledge in the world. Really,
it's fine.
A handful of people might
cut the bullet in half. It's all good.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah. And the thing is, like, I've often justified like. I played a character called Vaskeen for a long time. He would shoot everyone with an arrow. People would cross him even slightly. He'd be like, arrow in the chest. Because in a world where you can cast Cure Wounds and seal up a wound on your chest immediately, the consequences are pretty light, other than a bit of pain for sticking someone with an arrow, you know?
Dude,
so
actually, that's a stim pack there. If you're trying to do sci-fi, Cure Wounds, that's a stim pack.
There you go.
That's
Cure Wounds is a stim pack.
It's a why can I think of the word for a needle with an injector on? It's a syringe. It's a syringe enchanted with Cure Wounds, and it's full of like this glowing green liquid that's like a liquefied spell, and you inject it into someone, and that's what it is.
Actually, if you're playing an artificer, a lot of your spells you use either Tinkerer's tools or Alchemist tools, so you can totally be like, pour this into that, shake it up into a syringe. There you go. That's Cure Wounds for you.
The Artificer is probably like your best friend when it comes to classes if you want to do sci-fi, because you can do energy cannons, you can do a robot assistant, you can do literally anything mechanical that you kind of want to.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so that's my justification. Those are my 3 points. What was my first one again? Help me out here.
Just do it. Worry about the how later.
Worry about the how later. Point number 2, worry about the how. Point number 3, just have fun.
Yeah.
It took a while to get there, but I feel that's a fairly round education in sci-fi into your D&D world.
Yeah.
On another note for that comparison between Redalia and Caelda, Caelda being so like traditionalist and stuff is why they have their culture the way it is. And the way I justify it then is that Redalia to the south are way more about societal stuff. And a lot of stuff like Killed will just do the job because it needs doing. People in Redalia are basically capitalists. So they're like, I'll do it because it might make me rich.
Yeah.
And also it might make me better than the person next door. Like if I'm earning 1,000 gold a day and my neighbor next door is 500 gold, I'm better than him, and I like it that way. That's basically Redalians in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So even though they're right next to each other and they've never, I don't believe they've ever been at war. I'd have to check my notes on that. I don't think they've ever been at war on another, but that's usually because they're both and yeah, so they although they are different cultures, they don't really act a whole lot because they just have very different values, and those values don't necessarily translate over the border back and forth.
Cool. I suppose one last thing. Do you have any, considering you are the designated sci-fi guy of this podcast?
That's what my driver's license says.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have a driver's license.
I know.
But yeah, as I will say, our token sci-fi guy, do you have any either writers, shows, movies, books that you would recommend to anyone listening, or even myself, because I'm doing sci-fi stuff now, for like inspiration for D&D?
Well, first off, Token Sci-Fi Guy is going to be my new channel. I'm launching it. Subscribe down below. Token Sci-Fi Guy would be a great channel name. Okay, tips or sources, I should say. Check out even just look up some of the stuff for Rise of Legends. It's just a really great way of melding the two in a way that like it's kind of inconsequential, you know. It's just like over here it's like genies and scorpions, and over here it's Da Vinci punk, steampunk, clockwork men, and stuff like that. Check that out. Star Wars is a great example as well. I know it's pretty standard, but Star Wars, like when you think about it, it's wizards, it's samurai, it's cowboys, and they're in space. It's three or four things that normally never go together, and yet they work together. You know. So I think that's probably a good one.
I'd imagine someone like, because I'm only aware they exist. I haven't read any, but I'd imagine especially someone like what they're called, are they called Star Wars Legends now, with the expanded universe stuff, would have some wilder stuff than you'll see in the movies probably.
Oh wait, are you talking about the extended universe that was kind of deemed not canon after the new series came out, the new trilogy?
Yeah, the Star Wars. I think it's called Star Wars Legends now, isn't it?
I can't remember. Yeah, but there is a man. Oh man, there's 40 years of insane stuff. Whether it's comic books, novels, video games, there's loads of stuff there. It's great. What else do we have? I'm trying to think of games or movies. Well, I find it. Okay, again, I'm really having a hard time thinking of something. Skyrim has a cool one. If you look at like Morrowind or look Morrowind, look at Skyrim. Because both of them have a lot of dwarven stuff, and the dwarves in the Elder Scrolls are very the Dwemer. They're very steampunky in their design. It's really cool because it's like actual dwarven stuff you'd expect, but there's a steampunk element to it. Oh, and look at Warhammer. There's dwarves in Warhammer who have like gyro stuff like that.
Warhammer 40k is literally like D&D sci-fi.
Not even like the regular Warhammer stuff as well. The dwarves in that have gyrocopters and pistols and stuff as well. There's I forget and have dirigible balloons that they float around in and have cannons mounted to it and stuff.
I'm shocked you haven't said Stargate Atlantis yet.
Stargate Atlantis, yeah. I'm not trying to think of stuff that's both sci-fi and fantasy for like.
Stargate Atlantis is very fantasy. Like, and I think I was going to say actually that we didn't bring up as well. You'll see it in every sci-fi show. They'll have someone who uses a sword. He has like they have like an energy sword or something, and like or there'll be like a race of warrior aliens that all like use these like crazy energy swords and can teleport and go invisible and all this kind of like. They very much interbreed and interchange. Like it's super common.
I'd say basically if you just look at anything sci-fi, if you want to implement it into your D&D world, but your world's maybe a little bit more fantasy, take literally any sci-fi aspect you want to implement, right? And then just find a reason why that would work in a magical sense. If you want to have like an Imperial Star Destroyer, like maybe someone in your world has an evil kingdom or whatever has an Imperial Star Destroyer, and the Dark Lord, your version of Sauron, maybe a bit more like Darth Vader, and he's an anti-paladin or something.
Vauron.
Yes, Vauron. Schmar Schmader. But like, just be like, okay, what would Darth Vader be in this world?
Your audio just cut in there, sorry, Paul.
Oh, sorry. He'd probably be like an anti-paladin or an oathbreaker or something like that. Cool, that's him sorted. And then give him like a sunblade, but make it necrotic damage instead. It looks red.
And it's a dark blade.
And it's a dark blade. It's a shadow blade.
It's a dark saber.
And then if you want to be like, okay, how would an Imperial Star Destroyer work? Just do whatever you want to make this fantasy work. They've harnessed crystals from a certain cave, and those crystals can be mounted to the outside. Enormous. It's not even a Star Destroyer. It's a castle. Mm-hmm. It's a floating castle, and the castle specifically floats because there are crystals in its foundation and when you sit in the chair in the throne room, you're controlling that flying castle. I'm getting into Stargate Atlantis territory.
You're getting dangerously close to stuff I was thinking about for my game as well.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, and then look, we kind of said this to death already. That why something behaves the way it does is not really important because it's interchangeable. You know, again, like we said a while ago with the example of firebolt, a piece of metal that happens to be shaped like a gun that casts firebolt, it functions the exact same. You know, the function is the same. How you choose to shape it or skin it can make it more or less sci-fi. Arcane sounds like I have a great example of how you can have something that looks technological, but the why it's happening on the back end is totally.
There's a great example of that as well. We were saying, you know, if it's something that's fantasy, you can just kind of reskin it and just come up with a logical reason why like a technology powers this instead rather than magic. Yeah. So like I'm not a big Zelda fan, but I believe, is it called the Titan Gauntlets in Legend of Zelda, where they're like gloves that make Link really strong and he can pick stuff up that's really heavy.
It sounds like something that would be, but I cannot say for certain.
Oh god, I think it might begin with but there's basically there's a magical pair of gloves that in Breath of the Wild and other Zelda games where you can it allows you to pick up really heavy, really large objects and just move them really easily, and like those are a pair of magical gauntlets that allow you to do that. In Arcane, they eventually develop a pair of gauntlets as mining tools that are powered by Hextech, and they do literally the exact same thing. And it's just they've this big mechanical hand, and they like drop a Hextech power source into the hand there, and you see it just goes and kind of then he literally does what Link does in Legend of Zelda, and like picks up a big rock and crushes it with his hand. Like it's so easy. It's so you just you need like the flimsiest justification is the way I'd put it. Like
prime example of what that could be in D&D. Gauntlets of Ogre Strength.
Yes.
And whether you decide to skin them as the white and gold gauntlets with the ogre's face on them that they are in the DMG, or whether you say to your players, you find a pair of brassy coloured dark iron and brass coloured things. They've got cogs and little servos and stuff on the outside. And when you pull them on, all the cogs start whizzing, and you can feel like your grip is stronger. That's it's all you need. It can be the sci-fi. Maybe it even has like little servos and stuff that run up your arms that give you like additional.
Yeah.
What it does in the end game is far more important. The mechanical is far more important. Whether you want to lean more sci-fi or fantasy, because again they're the same thing. Whether you want to lean one way or the other is really how you skin it. Mm-hmm. And Martin.
Yes, Conor.
That's all the time we have for today.
Dude, that was really fun. Like I honestly had such a blast talking about sci-fi. And like I was saying, she was like, because it was such a last minute decision for me to just do that in my campaign now, and just thinking was like, no, we should talk about this because there's so much you can do, and it's all like really, really exciting, and it just opens up a whole new avenue for really cool stuff. And like, hey, maybe now you have like, you were saying, I can't remember what series it was, but there are like these like crazy like biomech guns or stuff. Like you could end up coming out of an arc with this where you have like, say for like your party, you have like a ranger, you have a wizard, you have a monk, and you have a cleric. And you come out of it then, and your ranger now, instead of using a bow, has this like biomech arm cannon that like attaches onto his arm and like projects a laser bow for him now instead, and it does force damage instead of piercing damage. Oh, so fun.
There's a guy in it's not really an anime, but it is. It's a French animated thing called Oban Star Racers. It's really good. There's a prince in that from a different world, and he even says magic words. What he does is he'll draw his bow with no arrow, and he'll say the magic words, and the arrow will manifest, and different effects will happen with the arrow based on that. And again,
he's an arcane archer, is what he is.
He's an arcane archer, but this is a sci-fi world, but that is very much looks like magic, so they can be so interchangeable.
Perfect.
But yeah,
Conor, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet here on the Micflayers podcast every Friday at 6 p.m. Irish time. Or you can find me on Twitter at 0.Conor, ZEROPOINTCONOR, 1N, very important. Martin, where can people find you on the internet?
Sure. People can find me on the internet on Twitter. So sorry it's over. You can also find me on the Micflayers podcast Twitter at MicFlayersPod on Twitter, both of which are in the right hand corner of my screen and then further down again. You can also find all of our social links there too. Other than that, you can mainly find me every Friday here on the Micflayers podcast, 6 p.m. Irish time, with one of my best mates to talk about D&D. And so
that's on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor Breaker, and Radio Republic. Sorry, I forgot to mention that a second ago.
Really impressive.
All those platforms.
I know.
They allow us to do this.
Indeed, indeed. But yeah, that'll be a goodbye from Conor.
Later, folks.
And it'll be a goodbye from me, and we will see you on the next episode of the Micflayers podcast. It's not you.